Seem to, at least on the northbound lane, and that's probably due to a lot of the traffic going to Nestle. But, probably what we can do is just that backhoe in there and scrape off the rumble strips that are there. And I can get with our paving contractor, not paving contractor, but our striping contractor. He can come back in and put in the, rumble strips.
Okay.
And we can probably do that in construction progress. I don't think we'll need a, favor or anything for it.
Okay.
Oh, one more question. Have you, you've been in contact with DOT about, Pickle Lane and Ninety, they cleared some
I
land.
haven't talked to them. I'm not sure what they're doing out there.
I'm not real sure, I think, the Pickle stopped off to Mickey, is that right? They said they're doing some restriping, but today they were down there and they painted one little strip right there where you stop, stop sign for the right turn, for the, along in there where you had that left turn lane, and came up a little bit, but it wasn't, it wasn't hardly as long as this table. I wondered what they said they were gonna do some more striping in there, I didn't know what they had.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Working
I can
on
call
what building.
somebody in Perry and see what I can find out if you want me to.
That'd be nice, okay.
I did get a few complaints, I mentioned it to Buddy about Country Kitchen, about the striping.
Yes,
He
sir.
said it was real hard to see at night.
Yes, sir. I think we've got some on, 255 as well.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Lonnie.
You're welcome.
Okay, now we'll move on to new business. Public hearing on the, polling location for upcoming election. Mr. Hardy, come forward.
Never been part of one of these public hearings. Do the public have to get to speak first, or how does that work?
What I would do is allow the supervisor to explain what we're talking
Right, that's
about
what-
here, and then once you've given an explanation, got everybody up to speed, then open it up to the
Well,
public.
I thought we wanted to explain, wanted you to explain what's going on here.
Awesome. Real quick, two things. Greenville election is set for March the 12th. They have two candidates and two different seats. And they have, we'll learn Tuesday night if they're gonna have something on amended, an ordinance. Don't know if that's gonna be on the ballot yet or not. Also, you hear a lot of talk about Halsey Bashir's. I called Division of Elections yesterday, and he publicly, resigned, but he hadn't turned in his paperwork. So until he turns in his paperwork, we cannot set an election. And unless they change something, we're looking at 45 days for military overseas ballots. You're looking at a week of qualifying, plus probably about 2 weeks to get all that stuff together, the paperwork, ballots, before we can have one. And so we're looking, still a good distance out. So I get a bunch of phone calls asking about it. That's where we're at. As soon as he turns in his resignation, then that clock will start. I'm here today to talk about, vote centers in Madison. And I've gotten a lot of good feedback, and the objections on it is, you look at, convenience. It was funny, I was in a restaurant this morning and was talking, and Mr. Steve was talking about in where he's from, they did the vote centers because of the storm. And did it work well with you?
Oh, absolutely.
He was, very impressed with it. And so, if you look at it, you got, voter convenience. You'd be shocked at the phone calls we get of somebody saying, hey, I'm in Cherry Lake, but I vote in wherever. And, do I have to go to my precinct? Yes, you have to. So either they do a provisional ballot, or they don't vote, or they drive that distance. And so if we did vote centers, that convenience, anybody could go anywhere. And the objection, or what we're looking at, is doing the 4 early voting sites. We cannot change those by law. We keep those 4 early voting sites. They'll run from Saturday to Saturday. Saturday, we'll close it that afternoon. We'll pick up one more in the south end of the county, which is Sermon's Fire Department, and this is just talking right now. I still gotta talk to the fire chief, there's some things. But, so we can open that one. If you look at some of those people in District 10 down on the south end of the county, one of them drives 16 miles to come to town to vote. If you look at on the South 53 area, I think it's 12 miles for some of those. So if you look at this would make sense. Anybody can vote anywhere. It's a financial savings. we're cutting those 11 precincts down to 5 on election day. So you have staffing, you have, in 2022, our voting equipment we should be looking at getting new voting equipment. So instead of having 24 units, we could have 12 units, 13 units. So looking in the future, and we all know what's going on in Madison, and I know when we sit down and talk budgets, it's almost a dogfight over a penny on the floor because everybody's so strapped. So here's a way that we can help with finances, but also bigger than that, anybody can vote anywhere at one location. I did some quotes on there from Bay County. He had 6 vote centers for early voting, and then he had 3 extra, so he had 9 total for 120,000 voters. And he's got very minimal complaints. And if you look at the next one down, it's Gulf County Supervisor of Elections. He had 2 in his county. They have just over 10,000 voters, which is close to us. They had a higher turnout than they've had since the midterm election in 2004. And that was what he was hearing was, hey, we can go anywhere. If you look at the statute, 101.001, and Tommy can help us more on this, but I make a recommendation, and the board needs to approve it. And what we're talking about is basically making Madison County one precinct. Because the way the law reads, you have to vote inside your precinct. But we have 5 voting places inside of that precinct. I reached out to the Division of Elections, I sent them a letter, I sent Tommy a copy of that letter, and they agreed on how we could do this. Tommy, you wanna add anything on that?
No, well, let me add one thing. I think the way you're gonna have to do it though, is we'll have to figure out that last, polling place where we're gonna do, and then you do a written resolution. And then, of course, the supervisor would have to sign off as well, saying that he, consents to that resolution. And then that would change that, and that's the written document we would need to do. For that, I think we can, if y'all want us to move forward, we can do that and put it on the next agenda to be approved.
And I sat down with Mr. Martin and said, hey, where do you think the best one? Because if you look at the county, what we're talking about, the 4 stars, that's early voting sites. And they're early voting sites now, and we have a very good turnout with it. The next one, the Circle Election Day, would be Sermons down there. It's a new location. We don't have to bring in extra porta potty, and so that would be only for Election Day. And I put some numbers on there too, just so you know. But typically, if you look at the 5 locations that we picked, there's 6,362 voters in that area. And again, if you look at how far away it is to drive, for some people already, their drive is still longer than any of these drives would be. So that's my song and dance.
Mr. Reed, we have to have 2 hearings, right?
You don't have to have 2 hearings, but you gotta do it in writing, so you gotta have a resolution prepared, so I'd have to do that and bring it back.
So actually what we're looking for is we would actually look for a motion for you to draft a resolution.
I think the first thing, obviously, is open up the public, let's see what
Yeah,
they,
okay.
and then once you hear from the public, then y'all could just instruct me, and I already know that you need a motion in a second, but by consensus, y'all want to proceed forward and let them draft a resolution.
Okay. Attorney, any more? I don't want to cut you off.
No.
Okay. Open up the public for comments.
Just one question, how long is the early voting period?
It's,
Saturday, and then you still have the Tuesday?
yes, and then Tuesday you would add the other site. So basically, these stars will be open from Saturday to Saturday.
We found that on the weekends, people come in earlier, so they're open 7 to 3, and during the week, it's 10 to 6. And so on Saturday, we close it down and we start preparing. Monday morning, we go in and we take out the equipment and the ballots that we need to and everything that we need to. Actually, on Saturday, we take the ballots. Everything else we take out on Monday. And we get this sermon precinct ready to vote for that day.
Okay. So the sermon would be open
In
the
early
early
voting.
week? Okay.
And we looked at the early vote numbers and that whole area down there, and it just isn't feasible right now. Now, later on,
it might be something that we can always come back and address.
All right, thank you. Looks good.
You were talking about, requiring updating your voting machines. And at such time when you do that, will you make sure that the machine has some kind of paper counting trail, or will it be all digital?
There's 2 vendors in the state of Florida that do voting, and so we have to go by those guidelines. But the one that we have now has a bunch of backups and different things that go along with it. If you want us to come by the office one day, and I can go through some steps and checks and balances and that kind of stuff, I won't go through it all, we'd be here all night. And there's some stuff that, I don't mind saying to individuals, but I don't want to put it out there in public. There's some safeguards in place. And another thing with this is, on election night, we could, mode them in with 5 locations, not so expensive, because every one of those have a phone line now. But with 11, it would cost the county a whole lot, and so we haven't.
If it is, I think that what Mr. Hardy is proposing, and it's a matter of financial savings and convenience, I would, go along with what Mr. Hardy is proposing.
When are your provisional ballots counted, Ms. Hardy?
The provisional ballots, it depends, some of them aren't counted. A provisional ballot is a catch-all for anything. If my dead dog gets up and goes in there and wants to vote, then we give them a provisional ballot. That way we can bring it back in and justify if it's legally, if they're a registered voter. Saying that to say, it depends on how the provisional ballot, because sometimes it might be a they don't have a photo ID, but their signature doesn't match what we have on file. They have so many days that they can come in and fix that. So it just depends. If they're not registered to vote, it's not gonna count. But if it's, the deal of no photo ID and the signature matched, we'll run it through the machine that night. But they have up until a certain period, and I see the laws changing on those time periods after the last election. I wish they'd put them all the same instead